I was thinking of Palestine, thinking of the machine that dehumanizes in order to pursue, whatever extractivism is at hand, and the business of war. So I was also thinking about that when it comes to like the love for the land, the love for your culture and your ways of life, um, in, as part of what we need to understand what is going on. Um, that what's happening to Palestine is happening to us. But at the same time, also understanding the gravity and how we could not really understand completely because we're not there. But uh, I mean it in the way of how love can also be a big, um, the big conundrum of our lifetimes when we individualize it or when we think about it as something for you to find and make sure that you in this lifetime find your other half, and this whole notion of romantic love, um, whereas love is in the very small things and the very everyday things. It's not this big um, important moment of your life. And it also made me think about all the institutions around love that capitalism have produced, or this idea that marriage has anything to do with love, for example. And when we look at the origins of that institution, how it was pretty much so that women could not hold property, could not have power, not even relationship with their own children. So that kind of kidnapping of the emotionality that our relationships are is what is the most egregious and the most murderous of it all. Um, so thinking about, again, Palestine is also thinking about all the relationships that are being dehumanized in the context of occupation, and in that way, indigenous peoples of the world and their relationship to the land and their relationship to each other hold that very principle of reciprocity and solidarity and commonality that is not in the equation of capitalism. So the more atomized and individual we become in the way we love, the less powerful community is, and the smaller it gets, and therefore the weaker we become in our acts of love, in our power to love. So I think of always about how necessary it is to deconstruct romantic love as the only expression of love that we can achieve or aspire to, and rather this other kind of love, which is not very, you know, it's not as seductive, or at least it's never like easy, and which is to show up for each other in the worst of times. For example, now to hold hope for Palestine, that's love, because it's hard, because it's very hard right now to think about it and to enact it. And so is that love that pushes you to go to a direct action, but at the same time is that one that keeps you hopeful and joyful with the ones around you and the people you love. So yeah, I was thinking about that too.
I think everyone in the world who is thinking about love or questioning love or doubting love should look to Palestine. So many people are already so moved by what they're seeing coming out of not the genocide itself, but people's resistance to it, right? And so many of our Palestinian comrades remind us, like, they love us until we're fighting back. They only love us when we're perfect victims, right? But the truest form of love that they show us is that resistance, is quite literally physically fighting for your people to exist. And we're called hateful for it, and we're called terrorists for it. And so if that's terrorism, if that high and profound form of love is what an entity like the United States calls that, then what is their definition of love? And we know what it is, and we know that it's worthless. So why on earth are we letting these institutions like the United States set the terms for what love is, or what hate is, or what evil is, right? We can't live like that. We simply cannot. And this, kind of brings up this something that I think about a lot, is that we are conditioned to understand love right now as being, it's based on insecurity, right? It's based on feelings of inadequacy. Many times people don't consider love to be legitimate unless there is an element of jealousy or possession, right? Love itself has been turned into a property relation. And like, proletarian feminists have been saying this and talking in depth about this for a very long time. This is not a new concept, and it's unfortunate to me that I don't see it talked about more. And
Because it needs to
so,
be talked about more.
yeah, like, and really, I think Red Nation needs to talk about it more, to be so real. As our relationships are ever shifting and fluid, as we enter some very difficult times, we've got to be very, very critical about the moments when we are centering our pain and our guilt, or maybe our pleasure and our comfort, over the broader fight, right? And I get it. We're human. We are not immune to propaganda. We are not totally, fortified against the world that we face every day. But let's be real. Like, let's be real about the consequences of letting that insecurity or that guilt or that hyper individualism overcome us. And like you, Levi, I'm very much a sucker for romantic love as well. I'm TRN's in-house hopeless romantic. And so this is why I think about this so much. And think about it. I think about it every single day, in relation to the political work, in relation to how we keep ourselves strong and hopeful, and how we keep, the fire inside us alive. I've been thinking very deeply, specifically these past few days, about the importance of self-love, and how we reach that without buying into individualism, or selfishness. And so, um, how do we parse through our conceptions, our love, and our deeply embedded like insecurities? And how do we try to like weave ourselves out of like the cocoon of guilt that our conceptions of love are like mostly shrouded in?
It's a good one. I don't know. I I think about John Trudell a lot because I think he was like the first time, because he talks about it as like those insecure behavior patterns and like as those things. Because that was the first time I think I heard an Indian talk about love, like other than like like our love songs or our love stories, like outside of like Lakota stuff. But I'm thinking a lot about what something Myra had said. It was like the idea of looking for love, like the idea that like we're searching for this love, and then when you started talking about like Palestine, it's like it's all around us, like love, like if we like it's literally all around us, like not to be like, I think that might be a movie title or something like that, but it is like we can look to so many different fronts. We could look to like the Kanaka Maoli and their fight against Cook, or their fight for Red Hill, or like we could look to, there's so many places, like, and especially when we talk about like indigenous peoples protecting a majority of biodiversity like around the world, like it's all around us, like open your eyes, like wake up, but um yeah, like the idea that we're looking for love, and then because I was taking notes like that love is taking action, and even sometimes like violence. Something that I had thought about is like we all hear stories of like people or relationships or friends or maybe even ourselves, we've been in a like a romantic partnership or something, and like in what we call love, like we have like hurt each other, or we've like things have not worked out. And I think there's a lot of reasonings for that, but it's like I know people who have destroyed themselves and hurt others in the name of love, right? It's like, and when you were talking about like what's United States definition of love, like possessiveness, ownership, like we replicate that. Like we've been colonized, we have been taught those things. So we were talking about like it's not about as much as like learning what love is, it's about unlearning. And it's not as much like I tell my students this too. It's like it's not about learning what it means to be human, or learning how to be Indian, or learning what it means to be like I have kids who are Blackfoot, I have kids who are Pueblo, I have kids who are Potawatomi. It's not as much about learning what it means to be that, but just remembering. And in order for us to remember, like we do have to unlearn, like we have to unlearn these insecure behavior patterns. We have to unlearn and and sit down. Like I do agree like with the self-love piece, and I have such a tumultuous relationship with the term self-love and like the concept of it right now, because as like a parent, like like I can self-love, and I can get really good at drawing baths, and I can get really good at like, taking care of myself and doing what I need, but I also need tremendous communal support. Like we cannot parent on our own. We cannot like, and in the same way, like I can love, yeah, yeah, like I can love myself, but I also need the love of my relatives, and I also need to be able to express that with my relatives. So like, not to knock on COVID's door too heavily and talk about like the lockdown and what that did, like I think that messed up like love in a lot of ways. Like when we got isolated, when we got put into these small, and the units that we had were tested and were tried. And I know a lot of people that came out like really hurt from that. I don't know if I know anybody who came out stronger. I'm sure there's rhetoric of that. I'm sure there's people who are like, "Oh yeah, we weathered COVID, and um, like it made me and my partner, or made my family or my unit stronger." And it's like, I don't know if I believe them, or if I do, it's just like you're not in the same struggle that like my relatives are, like, you know. Um, but yeah, I just think a lot about the love that like moves us to take action, the love that moves us. Like I've been so appreciative of a friend who has like brought me food. Like I had a relative who was able to give me a ride. Like I had a relative who was able to come and cook for my family, and that was tremendous. That like the little things like that, um, you know, and that's not romantic. Like that's not, you know, and I am a sucker that like, I love romance. I do want romance in my life. I don't think that it's like I don't think that it's like revolutionary or anything like that, but I do think that like what we call romance, and maybe this is where we can kind of start like deconstructing like that word and like its ties to like Romanesque, like romance, like the Roman influences. Uh, but yeah, I have a friend who actually she might be on the upcoming Mika. Um, she had just shared a post about just like, yeah, it's just like under capitalism, like it is actually like it's super easy for certain people to practice that romance, and it's super hard for other people to be able to have that, like especially as parents, like the ability to have a date night as a parent, like like that's crazy. Like that is, like it can be hard, it can be a struggle, and it's something that I very much try to cultivate and try to make sure that I have in my life. But a lot of people don't, you know.